So how exactly did a beloved grassroots game, the one played on muddy local pitches, turn into this incredibly slick, multi-billion euro global industry? Well, today we're diving into this explainer to unpack the economics, the massive rule changes, and the huge shift in fan culture that made it all happen.
Legendary manager Bill Shankly famously said that football was much more serious than a matter of life and death. And honestly, that quote perfectly captures the pure, deep emotional stakes of traditional football supporters. For over a century, football was really just a local community affair. It was driven by sheer passion, loyalty, and just the pure utility of the sport, rather than financial profit. For so many people, it was literally the heartbeat of their city. But I want you to contrast that raw, local emotion with a pretty staggering new reality. The international game is now a commercial industry worth roughly $12 billion a year. That's billion with a B. That monumental transition from a community asset to this massive corporate behemoth, well, it didn't just happen organically. It was carefully engineered. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to unpack this shift step by step. We'll start with the billion-dollar game, then look at the catalysts of the 1990s commercial explosion, the cycle of football wealth, the friction of fans versus financial investors, and finally, debt and financial fair play. All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the billion-dollar game, and how we went from the streets to the boardroom. The sheer velocity of this financial growth is absolutely staggering. Just think about this. By 2007, the total European football market hit 13.6 billion euros. Fast forward to the 2009 to 2010 season, and just the top 20 richest clubs alone exceeded 4 billion euros in combined revenue. And then, only 5 years after that, their aggregate revenue rocketed to 6.6 billion euros. This proves that football is definitely no longer a simple utility-maximizing sport. It is transformed into a highly tuned, profit-maximizing consumer service. Moving on to Section 2, let's look at the 1990s commercial explosion and the true catalysts of the modern game. Everything really kicked into high gear in 1992 when the UEFA Champions League introduced a lucrative new format, and they expanded it rapidly, going from 16 teams in '94 all the way to 32 by the year 2000. Now, expanding the tournament meant more primetime matches, which meant exponentially more television and sponsorship revenue. But intertwined with all of this is 1995. That was the year of the Bosman ruling. This was a massive legal milestone that granted players freedom of movement at the end of their contracts. That instantly opened the floodgates for a huge international player transfer market. Suddenly, clubs needed immense amounts of capital to buy the best free-moving talent. So, where did the capital to fund this crazy new transfer market actually come from? Well, it came directly from television. Back in the early 90s, Rupert Murdoch placed an absolutely astronomical bid for the exclusive broadcasting rights to English football. He actually did this primarily to save his failing B-Sky B television station. And wow, did the gamble pay off spectacularly. Murdoch proved once and for all that live sports broadcasting was the ultimate moneymaker, paving the way for the multi-billion euro broadcast deals that sustain Europe's top leagues today. Okay, Section 3. Let's look at the cycle of football wealth and really unpack this business engine. The core engine driving all of this is what's known as the cumulative causation model. It basically works like this. Initial revenue allows a club to buy better playing talent and better facilities. Better talent brings on-pitch success, like winning domestic leagues or making really deep Champions League runs. That success then unlocks a huge enlargement of the club's market, so they gain fans globally, which in turn drives even higher revenues. It's this continuous, self-reinforcing loop. Basically, in modern football, the rich inevitably get richer. Historically, clubs relied primarily on matchday revenue, selling tickets, right? But today, that is nowhere near enough to compete at the top level. The modern engine is powered by broadcasting rights and massive commercial sponsorships. Think about Arsenal signing that huge kit deal with Puma. To succeed today, clubs simply have to monetize their global brand far beyond the physical seats in their stadium. And make no mistake, this strategy works. 577 million euros. That single staggering number was Real Madrid's revenue for just the 2014-2015 season alone. That placed them firmly at the top of the financial money league. When a single club is approaching 600 million euros in one single year, you really start to understand the sheer scale of the modern football business. Let's pivot to Section 4, fans versus financial investors, and the human conflict at the heart of all this. All of this commercialization creates a really stark contrast in ownership models. On one hand, we have this romantic, democratic ideal of supporter ownership. This model fosters a long-term vision. It protects the club from corrupt external owners, and it keeps the fans highly united. But competing against that is the harsh reality of private investor ownership. Now, while this model carries a super high risk of debt, it's often literally the only way to secure the massive private capital required to wield power in the global transfer market. To win today, tradition often just loses out to billionaire investors. And this corporate shift is fundamentally changing who actually sits in the stadium. The traditional, deeply loyal supporter is increasingly being replaced by what's called the consumer fan. By using global TV and highly targeted merchandising, clubs are aggressively courting a younger, wealthier, much more cosmopolitan audience. These consumer fans might completely lack generational ties to the local city, and they often just choose to follow the most successful brands rather than inherited local allegiances.
Of course, this alienates local fans facing rising ticket prices and hyper-commercialization. So to manage that backlash, clubs have deployed corporate social responsibility. And look, CSR isn't just charity here. It is a vital strategic tool. Clubs use these initiatives to soften their corporate image, connect emotionally with online consumers, and really try to rebuild the community trust that has been heavily eroded by their profit-driven agendas.
That brings us to Section 5, debt and financial fair play, or basically saving the game from itself. In a desperate scramble to buy the very best talent and secure that sweet Champions League money, a lot of clubs just spent recklessly. This resulted in massive deficits, unpaid player wages, and in some really tragic cases, the total bankruptcy and collapse of historic teams. The absolute relentless pursuit of success created a highly toxic culture of debt. To stop the entire ecosystem from just completely collapsing, governing bodies had to step in. Recognizing that widespread debt was literally threatening European football stability, the UEFA Executive Board introduced the concept of financial fair play back in 2009. Strict new licensing regulations officially took effect by the 2011 to 2012 season. The ultimate goal here was to legally force clubs to live within their generated means and try to protect the competitive balance of the sport. And all of this brings us to a pretty provocative question. Has commercialization permanently cost the beautiful game its soul? We've seen how billions of euros, private investors, and global broadcasting transformed a local community pastime into this massive international entertainment juggernaut. But as you look at the models and numbers we explored today, I really want you to ask yourself if the relentless pursuit of financial dominance has broken the emotional bond that made football the world's most beloved sport in the first place. Think about that next time you watch a match. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the systems around you.